Listen, I hope you're all well. I hope you're all having a fantastic Friday. And this is a non-race weekend. But you know what? We've got to keep the live chats up, even though it's quite techie when we're talking about F1 these days. What's going on, Sylvie? What's going on, Henry and Hanny? I hope you are all good, man. What are we going to talk about? I feel like I've let Mercedes off these past few days and these past couple of weeks, and no longer. I'm gonna just smash them. I'm gonna smash them. I'm gonna smash Mercedes fans moreover around the world because they've been getting them on nerves. Lewis Hamilton fans around the world, naive Lewis Hamilton fans as well. Let's just say that. Go on then. On this stream, I'm gonna answer your questions first because I never do that. I never get to the questions first. 5 of you watching concurrently. I hope you're all well. 7 likes. Do me a favour and smash that like button. Frank, what's going on? I hope you're well, mate. It's a bit weird in the world of F1 this week, isn't it? It feels like, I mean, every time I come to you with these live chat videos, obviously I check the news, I see what I'm interested in and what I'm not interested in. And it feels like a bit of a halfway house this week. A lot of the websites that I often read, again, the motorsports of this world, the Planet F1s of this world, the Reddit, a lot of them are just recycling these old news stories. You've got Checo Perez, you've got Christian Horner talking about bloody Ferrari's lack of competitiveness. You've got Ferrari talking about tyre deg. You've got Mercedes talking about tyre deg and underperformance. You've got Mercedes talking about how they're going to nail it in 2024 and beyond. You've got Mercedes talking about 2026 and how they're ahead of the curve as far as their engine or power unit development. Louis, what's going on, bro? It's crazy, man. It's crazy, and it leaves me ever so slightly disenchanted around the rest's chances of challenging Red Bull. It really does. And in principle, here's why. Because I don't trust a couple of different reasons. So first and foremost, and again, Ross Brawn has talked to this, right? Ross Brawn in the week that was has encouraged Red Bull to do the move that all of F1 apparently want them to do. That is get rid of Checo Perez. Speak for yourself, Ross. I'm not sure that I want that, even though I am all in for more competition. Ross's argument, of course, is that we will have more competition at the front if Max Verstappen has a teammate that's capable of challenging him. I know, Slope, it had to be done, bro. I will tell you, I'll fill you in on why I'm wearing this bloody shirt. This is my attire, Slope, for the old. What's going on, Nenge? I hope you're good, bro. Yeah, this is my attire, man, for the day job. When men are out here interviewing, then unfortunately man have to put on the proper garms and get the god tier trim. Where was I? Right, Christian Horner's not going to get rid of Checo Perez. And you know what? I don't hate that, even though I'm dying for more competition. I give Checo Perez a bit more of a chance, surely, because he's doing new things. His industry levels have gone up. And listen, give the dude some more time, man. Checo, but we saw the reception that he got in Mexico. The levels of worship in that area of the world are different, properly different, and I've always said it's promotional malpractice not to appreciate that when you go to a driver's home country that the level of fanfare is going to be next level. It is going to be next level, and so the FIA and FOM more precisely need to leverage that. Right, we can't have 20 drivers on the grid all from Europe. That doesn't make sense. You've got to diversify your portfolio, and in that sense, Red Bull have always done F1 a service. It's been said on more than one occasion that there's no team on the grid that do a better job of bringing F1 cars to civilians, to people, non-F1 fans all around the world via, I don't know, their Checo Perez race to Las Vegas, or Checo Perez races across Mexico, or Checo Perez races across New York. They pull together these very viral clips and they do them off their own back, right, at their own cost. So that to say, I think Red Bull are doing the right thing in keeping Checo Perez, because that obviously keeps a mega market in Latin America bought into F1. You can't just focus on North America as the growth market and then just forget about all the other markets all around the world, because that doesn't make sense. Surely doesn't make sense. Let's talk about Mercedes, and then I'll get to your guys' questions again. And every time I do one of these, 24 hours before, at least 24 hours before, community tab, there will be a post. If you've got something that you want us to touch on, put the question in there and we will get to it. Promise. I promise. And in addition to getting to you guys, you legends in the chat, but it's difficult, right, sometimes to balance all these. There's the chat, there's the live chat, it's long. So if there's something that you desperately want to talk about, put it on the community tab, and we'll be sure to get to it. And then go Zoof. I don't know how to pronounce that. Yeah, what happened to Murky's? We will get onto Murk properly, because I know there's a couple community tab questions. So I'm trying to keep my powder dry. Catherine, Liam Lawson drove Red Bull car around Bathurst in Australia. Yeah, well, as you see, Catherine, they're doing these massive PR stunts that don't just serve Red Bull. There is a drip feed of a marketing upside as far as F1. Who else is doing that stuff? Well, Mercedes are definitely not. Ferrari, okay, so there's an inbuilt goodwill around Ferrari in Italy and the red car and whatever, but they're not taking it to they're not doing any races across America at their own cost. No, sir. So I don't know. It's techie. All right, then let's get to some questions. Louis, a Red Bull, not there to entertain the fans, give Max competition. They're there to win. You know what, Louis, you make the point, bruv. You do make the point. They've got to make decisions. Yeah, they've got to make decisions in their own image, right? Agency's a thing here, my G. Couldn't sleep, massive headache. Get me right. I'm gonna try and help you out there. Jean, you need to let me know how to pronounce your name properly. I don't know whether it's Jean or Jean, and I am a multilingual settings. I like getting the names, the pronunciation of the names, the phonetics right. Okay, quick heads up before we get to questions. Shakedown, Baxty B, and the legend that is Shez, with a special guest coming out at some point today. I just need to edit the video. My guy Aldas Levels talking about Alonso's top 5 moments in F1 history. Really, really good conversation. Lots of back and forth. Proper. Sean, there we go. Sean, got it. Sean, I've got it. All right, let's get to some questions, because it's a bit mad, this. Get to some questions and some Mercedes stuff. All right, look. Green Lantern says, do Mercedes engineers still not understand the car and the regs, or is there a fundamental issue, rear suspension, left over from the failed zero pod concept that prevents them from making a consistently competitive car? So to the last one, I've been on here arguing for the longest time that the basis, the fundamentals of that zero pod concept was never going to be right for these rules and regs. It just wasn't. You guys have seen me a number of times on here talking about how that zero pod concept. Listen, when you don't have barge boards, the struggle, the mission statement, the primary objective is to manage that wake through to the rear bing ream, or whatever you call it, right? Manage that dirty air untied behind your back, right? It just doesn't. You need no barge boards. Mean big side pods if you're to manage the wake and the clean air. That's just the way it is, right? They're not managing the wake, hence they're still experiencing instability at the rear. And round a track like Brazil, particularly in Sector 2, you're going to have issues, and they know with that design philosophy they're still going to have issues, hence why they tacked on that bloody rear wing. They messed up the rear, the ride height, but still in-baked. That car, that W14 car, isn't as aerodynamically efficient as some of the others. Mention no names, the RB19. Mention no names, McLaren. And that's just the nuts and bolts of it. Sadly, though, I think there's something more insidious going on here at Mercedes, because discount the ride height, they put that humongous rear wing on, and that should have accounted and or offset some of the extreme levels of tire deg that they were experiencing, right? That notwithstanding, what happened in Brazil? Massive tire deg yet and still, and that concerns me. That makes me think, Green Lantern, that they still haven't got their head around the W14 as a concept. And if you're going to roll that forward into W15 or something similar, sans zero pod, then that's an issue, right? That speaks to me to a lack of understanding. I still don't think they know what's going on, and they need to find out quickly, right? Because right about now, they'll be dealing with the development of next year's car. No longer, I mean, what are they competing for? What, the vice champion? Nobody cares about second place. Lewis doesn't care. Lewis has talked a number of times about the focus is on the next 6 months developing a car that can challenge Max Verstappen for the championship in 2024 and 2025. He doesn't care about second. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion. Not interested, mate. So they need to, I don't think they understand it properly. And George made the point, right? George Russell, first of his name, of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, made the point that last year Brazil was their best Grand Prix. This year it was one of their worst. Like, what? They don't understand. Okay, different parameters, slightly different car. But bloody Nora, surely you should be able to bring the same data set that you lose to such good effects last year, leverage that, tinker ever so slightly, and then go again. Maybe I'm being a bit that. Maybe there's something that I'm missing here, and I'm not using my common sense. Green Lantern continues. Will Mercedes strategists ever adapt to competing instead of managing a race from the front? So far, no sign they don't. This is so techy. Green Lantern nails it, hasn't he? He's hit on the point there that Mercedes are still moving as if it's like W12 and they've got like a second on the field or something. Like, it's not that time anymore. They can't afford to be making like 3.3 second and 3.6 second pit stops as they did with Lewis Hamilton a couple of races back, which pretty much could have cost him the victory. If you're a market leading outfit in F1, every tenth has to matter, because ultimately you're like pummeling hundreds of millions of dollars and pounds year on year in pursuit of tenths, because F1 is a story told in tenths, and championships have been won and lost and will continue to be won and lost on very, very fine margins. So with that in mind, kill the low hanging ones first. And in my mind, always pit stops and strategy are very like okay, so the pit stops more so than the strategy, but they're easier ways to gain a second, as versus like, I don't know, aerodynamic genius of a side pod that very sexily conducts the clean air into the rear beam, the beam wing or whatever. Like, it's easier to nail those things. Practice and a bit of common sense. And I think, to Green Lantern's point, I'm still okay. So they improved at Brazil as far as the pit stops. They were quicker, but one swallow doth not a summer make. And yeah, listen, I'm reserving judgment. I am reserving judgment because I tell you what, this is as good a time as any to talk about Mercedes fans, because they're doing my nutting. I'm not going to do the old. I don't want to pat myself on the back here, but we've been having these conversations about the flaws in the Mercedes design, the fundamentals of the Mercedes design for damn near 18 months now, over the course of which Mercedes have continued to pursue this flawed design concept, notwithstanding the rest of the world saying this is not good decision making. Should have sat off. Fail fast, Mercedes. Fail fast. Should have sacked off this design concept 18 months ago, and we might not be fighting Max Verstappen and Red Bull for a championship. That might be still a bit aspirational, but they'd be closer. They would be closer. And that, for me, is the travesty in all of this. Mercedes fans around the world, there are a portion of Mercedes fans, online journalists, yeah, who have I'm going to talk very honestly and openly because it's getting on my nerves. There's a portion of the fan base who let's just say lack insight. They talk in a matter of fact way that's just so this has happened and this is what to do now. And I'm an accountant by nature, so I'm always forward focused, like to do the okay, this is what's going on now and this is what's happened in the very recent past. I think is child's play. Anyone can do that. What are you adding by saying here's where we are now? It's online journalism, man. I'm forward focused, and that's what I was doing 18 months ago when I was saying, listen, this concept isn't the one to take us forward as Mercedes fans. If we want competition, if we want to give Lewis Hamilton, if you want to use Lewis Hamilton in the twilight of his career, one of the best drivers that I've ever seen sit behind a steering wheel, then you want to abandon this concept. That was 18 months ago. A lot of the fan base only just now cutting in onto two things: the failure of the strategy, three things even: strategy failure from Mercedes, the dodgy pit stops, and a car philosophy that hasn't worked for 18 months. And that frustrates the hell out of you peddlers, because I've been arguing this for 24 months now. And 24 months ago, a lot of the fan base was saying, oh, Cameron, stop being such a Debbie Downer. Oh, Cameron, they're a world-class outfit. You don't win 8 Constructors' Championships for no reason. Oh, Cameron, I keep the faith. Faith? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? That counts for nothing in F1. I've been saying that now for 24 months, and only just now the people are coming out on Twitter and social media and Instagram and going on like they've found out some news. Like only now, like now we need to change the car. What? Ted Kravitz told you, if you watch Ted's Notebook, Ted Kravitz has been saying this for 16, 18 months that you need to change the concept. Have you got a plan B? If you haven't got a plan B, Mike Elliott, then you need to go and get one. Has he not been saying that? So where's the news in saying that they need to change their car now? 16 to 18 months too late, and I've had enough. I'll tell you that much. I apologize for ranting, but as passionate as I am as an F1 fan and a Mercedes and a Lewis Hamilton fan and a fan of racing and Max Verstappen by proxy, it frustrates me that people are coming out like they've got changed the car now. Oh, the pit stops aren't working. What do you mean the pit stops aren't working now? The pit stops haven't been working for about 4 years, mate. What, you only just noticing it now? Nah, I'm not having that. That peddlers, I find frustrating. Indulge me. Number 3, Green Lantern says, when does Mercedes team management acknowledge that both drivers intend to compete directly for both wins and championships, that neither will willingly accept second driver status, and thus team orders will never be successful with this driver pairing? Oh my God. Right. You guys have seen the viral clip of Peter Windsor saying, listen, when you have a Sir Lewis Hamilton, what you don't do is get a George Russell in the other car. And I understand it. And I'm with him. If you want a simple life, you got a number 1 driver. You want a driver that's fast enough to pick up second place, but not fast enough to disrupt that number 1 driver, right? Because I think whenever, listen, you can go, if past this prologue, and you go back throughout history, right? Anytime there's been a competitive, 2007 is a brilliant example, and one that springs to mind with Lewis and Alonso in the McLaren. Anytime it's close, what you can't afford, if you are an F1 team who harbours aspirations of winning a driver's championship, yeah, smash the like, little grey squirrel, please do. Appreciate that, man. What you can't afford to have in a close battle where you haven't got like a dominant W12 Mercedes, what you can't afford to have is your drivers taking points off of each other, or at least take it more precisely. You can't afford to have your drivers taking more points off of each other than they are off the next team. And Max Verstappen as an example. I hear it. We'll see how it plays out, man. If they can have if Mercedes can institute a driver hierarchy sufficient to where George Russell is taking more points off of Max Verstappen than he is Lewis Hamilton, cool. How they engineer that circumstance is beyond me. That's far above my pay grade. Oilfield, I appreciate you, man. You guys are, yeah, you know what, Richard? I love the sport too much to let bias get in the way of truth saying. Honestly, like I can't, and I suppose that's why I get frustrated at the fan base. It's like, oh no, you've got to have faith in Mercedes. Well, like, why? Like, to support them and root for them and want Lewis Hamilton to win is one thing, but to trust the concept that when you dig deep, when you deep dive the fundamentals of that concept, it was never going to work. Okay, so it looked sexy and it was different to the rest of the field, and people said, you can't just do what Red Bull are doing. But ultimately, what are they going to do now? You listen. If here was my point then, and this is still my point. If Red Bull have happened upon the apex predator of a design philosophy for this set of rules and regs, then converge now. Fail fast on the zero pod concept and converge to the Red Bull way of doing things. Who cares if people are going to say that you're copying them? Who cares? Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to these questions, lest I get back in my bag, because it's so they do need to. Green Lantern makes a really, really good point here. They do need to. There's an action around the driver hierarchy. There is, because they can't afford for George to take points off of Lewis, or at least very specifically, and in conclusion, they can't afford for George to take more points away from Lewis's driver haul in the driver championship standing than he does Max Verstappen's. That's the point, right? Game of Ender says, list of George's mistakes, bad luck. Okay, so there's a fairly comprehensive list there that you're going to see. Overall, the point is, some is definitely useful. Okay, let's talk about George then. Let's talk about George. Because let's remember, let's not have short memories. George beat Lewis Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship last year. Now, of course, there were some extenuating circumstances around that. People will argue, Lewis Hamilton fans around the world will argue that Lewis was carrying that team as far as the testing and putting sensors in his car in Australia, and maybe not necessarily in the best place, particularly still so quickly after 2021 and recovering. But George did beat Lewis. He beat Lewis Hamilton last year, so George is not a shabby driver. Nobody's going to tell me that he is. And again, this is where it comes to the bloody non-bias thing, right? George is, I think, after Alonso and Lewis are gone, Max is the pole sitter, right, for the next set of championships. But then it's Charles, it's Lando, and it's George. I think everybody, by all accounts, everybody will agree with that. I'm not going to be the one to listen. George will take points off of Lewis because he's just got that killer instinct. He's always had that killer instinct, and I'm not going to be the one, just because I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan, to suggest, to implore Mercedes to clip that guy's wings. I don't want to see George wipe Lewis Hamilton's bottom for him. I'm not about that life. That's not I want to see racing. I want to see Lewis beat George on merit. Ultimately, that's what I'm here for. And so to say, oh well, George is a snake and he's trying to leverage pit stops again and go against the team just so that he can beat Lewis. Well, of course he wants to beat Lewis. Of course he wants to beat Lewis. Why, if that's your teammate and the story of F1 is told, ultimately your success is a function of how frequently, first priority order is a function of how frequently you beat or lose to your teammate. Surely? I don't know. So I think to the point, I think George does get a bit of a bad rap, but you gotta try and tranch the opinions of like die-hard fans. Passion can obscure for bias. I said that wrong, haven't I? Here's what I mean. Passion doesn't lend itself well to objectivity. And sometimes you will hear fans get in their bag about George is this, George is that. But George is just an F1 racing driver. What else do you expect him to do? Selfish by nature. He couldn't become an F1 driver if he didn't have that in his bag. Selfishness is what I'm talking about. So of course he's going to try and be, every single race weekend, he's going to turn up and he's going to try and leverage, just like Senna did and just like Alonso does every single race weekend, just like Max does and just like Lewis does. George Russell's racing driver is going to leverage everything in his artillery to try and maximize for his points tally over the course of that race weekend. And I can't hate that. I don't hate that, Pedless. How can I hate that? Okay, so he's fallen foul of some unfortunate instances per our mate here, Game of Ender. But I don't think that's the start and the finish of George Russell's story. Ultimately, I leave it here. George is a brilliant driver, man, and he's got lots of potential. Lots of potential. He will be a driver's champion one day. Peter says, for all of you Mert fans, also you, Cameron, you've been spoiled for years. What do you expect? 15 years of domination. Relax and enjoy the new king of F1. If you really love F1, I've been watching Lewis all these years and earned it. You know what? Peter makes a half decent point there. But again, I don't want to do the gatekeeping thing. I've already done enough of that on this stream. I don't want to do the gatekeeping thing and tell people the way in which they should ingest their F1, what they should or shouldn't be interested in, because that's not what we do here on this channel, is it? I agree with Peter though, like the nature of F1 and high level sports more generally is that it's cyclical. Nobody wins forever. Every dominant streak comes to an end at some point, as will Red Bulls one day and Max Verstappen's, but I digress. But it is interesting. This again goes to the point that we just made, right? The way in which everybody ingests their F1 is very different. This is the truth. Speedy Bruss says, let's talk, mate. This is what we're here to do on the channel. And Cupid says they are rubbish anyway. I think we're talking about Mercedes still there. Well, they have been rubbish. I can't even hate it. Yeah, we're not saying anything there. They have been rubbish. They have been rubbish. But the pertinent question, the salient one, is will they continue to be rubbish into next year? I mean, F1 fans around the world need them to be better, eh? Much better than they have been. But you just don't, there's no telling, man. Nobody has an inherent God-given right to win in perpetuity. You've got to earn that. And when I start seeing Toto Wolff talking how he's been talking, well, that was the worst Grand Prix weekend in 13 years, blah, blah, blah. Well, at least they realised the full extent of Mercedes' depravity, their inefficiency, their ineptitude over the past couple of seasons. And like anyone that's ever had any interactions with any sort of Alcoholics Anonymous group, the first stage is to recognise that you have a problem. And that's what Toto Wolff was doing for me at the Brazilian Grand Prix. They expected to be higher, didn't they? And the joke is that their position still flattered to deceive. DNFs all over the shop. They would have been outside of that top 10, but for DNFs. They might be worse than. Here's what I think happened to Mercedes. I think they got lucky, right? Remember, altitude and like contour, you're not going to beat Red Bull around a Spa or a Silverstone. Let's remember that the vast majority, there is a type of corner that occurs most frequently. If you look at the entirety of the F1 calendar, like it's your kind of like your fast to like your medium to fast, not quite maggots or Beckett's, trying to think. Like you kind of like 100 to like 160 mile an hour corners. If your car does well around there, it will do really well around, like on average, it will do really well around most tracks. And that's what Red Bull have set up their car for. Hence why it doesn't perform brilliantly, or as brilliant as it does around Silverstone as it does around Monaco, because it's short and it's focused on the ability to get on the throttle right. That's where an Aston Martin would do better, and that's why Alonso nearly put it on pole around there. There was a reason why I was talking about that, but I've lost my train of thought. Of course you have, Cameron. Mercedes just need to fix up. That's what Mercedes need to do. Here we go. This is what I was saying. So look, Mercedes had taken, I feel like Mercedes, I've always come in here and talked about their inability to think in an agile way, as per the pit stops, as per the strategy, and as per the design philosophy. So here's what I mean about the design philosophy. Listen, you turn up to Singapore and you turn up to COTA and Mexico and realize that those are anomalous circumstances, right? Because of the altitude, because of the COTA, you've got all this undulating stuff going on. And so Red Bull, with their aerodynamically efficient car, they're not going to be able to extract or optimize for their setups as they would around a Silverstone or I don't know, or a Spa as an example, because they've got to raise the ride height and account for the contours and account for the altitude. Remember, altitude is the kryptonite of an aerodynamically efficient car. Just the air is thinner, right, at altitude. So the RB19 just doesn't work as well as it would around a Silverstone or a track at sea level. Mercedes, then, what Mercedes shouldn't do is look at a COTA or a Mexico and say, oh, we're back on the right track. What they need to do is discount for this anomalous circumstance, understand that they have outperformed a Red Bull around these tracks because of those altitude bumpy tracks. When you get around something flat like Brazil, but Brazil's still at altitude, Vegas is different. But when you get around, I keep saying Silverstone and Spa, you'll hear me use those as a reference a lot because they're like the proper tracks. When you get around those, that's where you benchmark it. That's where you understand exactly the how aerodynamically efficient your car is. So it upsets me then that Mercedes are looking at, like, they've looked at Mexico, they've looked at COTA, and they've like, okay, so we're on the right track. And then they get to Brazil and like, oh my God, what's gone on? What do you mean, what's gone on? What's gone on is that you haven't discounted for those anomalies. You shouldn't be surprised. Like, what, you thought you were going to win in Brazil again? You only won in Brazil last time because Red Bull messed up their setup. It was a sprint weekend and they got their ride heights for Gazy. That's what happened. So what, you know what? I don't know. I don't know. It's yeah, Mercedes have got some fixing up to do, and I hope they can do it very, very quickly. I think we all hope they can do it for some decent racing. Who doesn't want to see? I think even at this point, when you hear Max talking, he's kind of like, Max wants to be challenged. I think you get the best out of Max Verstappen by challenging him. I think he needs challenge. I think he's that. I think he. Listen, as good as he is, I think he relishes in challenge. And I'm tired of people talking about how, oh, Max Verstappen's not that good because I haven't seen him in the face of adversity. Were we not watching in 2021? Holy smokes. Like, how could you get a season more adverse than having to race 7-time champion Lewis Hamilton every single bloody race? For the championship, from race 1 to race 22 or whatever it was, how could you get more adverse a circumstance? Okay, so you want to see it go again. Let's run it back. But to say that this dude doesn't do well in adversity, what? Nonsense. Evidensibly nonsense. Right, let's read out. So, Jean, some are forgetting Brazil 22. Exactly that. So by that, Jean saying that I've just made the point, haven't I, Jean? Madeline in Austin, Wolf was saying Mercedes with the Madeline, honestly, that's what concerns me. What is he talking about? What was he on about? Jean says, unfortunately, George couldn't keep up with losing clean air, burned up his engine. So this is you guys are talking about Brazil, and this is what concerns me, right, and makes me think and conclude ultimately they still don't know their line of travel. They just don't know it, not yet. Because it's just they wouldn't be making those mistakes that they've made at Brazil as far as the ride height, as far as tune up their tyres so quickly, if they were more certain in their line of travel as far as the design philosophy. In my humble opinion, I'm speculating massively here, but that's just my opinion. The past is irrelevant, says Abu Zaz. We don't live in 2022, mate. Well, this is. Lewis Hamilton fans and Mercedes fans around the world, Abu Zaz, are saying that's what we're hoping, right? But we're not seeing that. I'm personally not seeing the progress or evidence sufficient to give me confidence about Mercedes or any other team for that much, not named McLaren, being able to compete with Red Bull in the outer years. I'm just being honest. Slow Pat, apparently Red Bull are coming out with a new and somewhat different. Okay, so I've heard a lot of chatter around Adrian Newey's comments to Eddie Jordan, basically saying the rest need to watch out because we're coming in 2024. Listen, in a year where they've had zero challenge, what do you think they've been doing? Red Bull they've only had next year's car to focus on. What do we think they've been doing? I don't know. Sylvia says that Gabriel living rent free in your head. What's Gabriel said here? I can't keep up. I can't keep up, Sylvia. But Cam in Brazil, they had the same car as in Cota, but they rode at legal heights at Interlagos. Okay, but Cota is a very different track, right? So this is what I'm saying. So Interlagos, if you picture Interlagos, and this is the point that I'm making. Okay, so they rode apparently. So you can only, it's 10 millimeters, isn't it? The skid block can only wear, I think it's 10 millimeters, and they wore like 16 millimeters, so they're 6 millimeters over the legal limit. So they were legal. I think Lewis Hamilton has got a point. I'm not sure how much performance you would get out the 6 millimeters. And listen, I think Blake's put a video, Break F1 has put a video out about this. I'm not sure, you're not going to get like, from that 6 millimeters worth of wear, you're not going to get like 5/10. Do you know what I mean? It's not like it doesn't translate to that much performance. Here's what the difference is though. That track at Cota is very heavily contoured, right? Very heavily contoured. So again, it doesn't speak to the advantages inherent in that RB19 design philosophy. That's the issue. Sylvia, don't be daft. You're welcome. Banter always in the chat each and every single time, Sylvia, legend. It doesn't lend itself. So if you're doing a compare and contrast to compare the market at Cota, they want to account for that. Mercedes can't look at that and take away some sort of data set or any sort of positive outcome saying, oh, well, we're close to Red Bull on race pace now. Well, how anomalous of a track is Cota? Cota's unlike any other track, pretty super anomalous in its contouring, and it's like long straights and jump hard on the brakes, right? Suit to Ferrari. So they've got to be there. Here's what Mercedes have to do if I'm going to solve for their issues. They've got to design a car that excels in the characteristics that you see most frequently on the calendar, being medium to high type turns, sack off the low turns. Okay, so there's a lot of time to gain. Sector 2 at Brazil, as an example, it can't be a complete dud around hairpins, but you want it to excel around the type of turns that are most frequently occurring. True or false? That's the way I interpret it. And that's what Red Bull have done. Hence why Mercedes and the rest, McLaren are already doing it. Mercedes and the rest of the bods on the grid, the other 8 teams, need to converge to that RB19 concept. Leverage the Venturi tunnels properly. Wide side pods, as an example. Anti-dive, if that's even a thing. That's exactly what they need to do. And that's what they haven't been doing, pursuing this zero pod concept longer than necessary. Fail fast, Mercedes. Come on, man. It is nonsense. But I digress. It can wear my 1 millimeter. There you go. Slow back. Thank you. And it had worn. So I think Ferraris had worn 13 millimeters. 1.3 millimeters, sorry. And Mercedes had worn 1.6 millimeters. There we go. Appreciate you, slow back. Appreciate you. What's Gabrielle saying? You never have an educated response, just pee pee. Gabrielle, I've got no dog in this fight. You guys have got a listen. If it's banter in here, then keep it healthy, Gabrielle. Keep it healthy. Sophie Jean, thank you. And childish. Yeah, we don't deal with the childish behaviour in it. Banter and disagreement, I am for, because we're all fans of different drivers and different teams. And listen, it's a conversation. Abizas, how does the archaic management style with the Mercedes hamper their progress? The German outfit is known for this. I think their inability to act and function in an agile way even is definitely linked to that. How could it not be, Abuzaz? But again, this is all conjecture and speculation from afar. Louis, in 2026, Max will gain 3 years of experience, while Lewis will be 3 years older. Louis, you make a point, right? And we made this point on the shakedown a couple episodes ago. I don't think Lewis is... To say that Lewis is not in his prime isn't to say that Lewis is over the hill. I think those two things can exist in the same space. But Max is a very difficult proposition if any one of those other 19 drivers are gonna beat him. in the outer years, because he's not getting Louis. I subscribe to that. He's not getting any worse. He's Max Verstappen. It seems every single race weekend he's adding more composure, more racecraft, greater race IQ. He's only solidifying, even though it sounds like they hate each other sometimes, he's only solidifying his relationship with his race engineer GP. Max Verstappen in an Adrian Newey designed Red Bull is a problem for anyone. That's just the truth. I mean, you can pick holes in his weakness. Is he get-attable? I think he is. I mean, you can argue Singapore 2 consecutive years. There's been buzz. So year 1, there was buzz around cost cap. And year 2 at Singapore, there was buzz around, I want to say, was it Helmut Marko's dodgy comments? And each of those races had problems. So I think when there's, if I was going to target Max Verstappen and try and get at his, if he has a weakness, I think when there's furore around Red Bull, Max just wants to arrive at a Grand Prix and drive. He doesn't want any distractions, right? He wants to optimize for his CPU and have as much bandwidth as possible. But when there's all these external things going on, Red Bull have goofed up and said this, there's another asterisk over your championship because of cost cap infringement. Helmut Marko said this, and there's all this buzz around it in the news. And when there's that sort of stuff, I feel like that's the time when Max isn't necessarily at his best. Engineer that if you're Mercedes. I don't know. If you go back to the classic managerial style of a Sir Alex Ferguson, he'd do whatever he could, right, to get an advantage over his opponents. And maybe Mercedes need to do that. But again, my guy and pseudo mentor Peter Windsor has said for the longest time that Mercedes are a blue chip organization and they can't leverage the dark arts as much as a Red Bull because their rules of engagement and code of ethics are different, right? Because their shareholders are going to hold them to a higher state of accountability, which is interesting. Xavier, I'll read out these last ones and then I'm going to run away. Peddlers, I've gone how long have I gone? Ages. Longer than I intended. All right, I'll read out these last ones and then I'm going to run away. But I wanted to make this a proper live chat. Normally I ramble on and then squeeze in the chats at the end, and these are meant to be live chats. So I want to go back and forth with you guys. And then I'll talk to you about the channel a little bit and hopes for the next couple of months. Xavier says, maybe expectations on Mercedes were too high after those. Of course they were, Xavier. Of course they were. Absolutely 100% they were too high. But it's almost unreasonable to not expect them to be too high. Especially when you consider 25% of the viewing public have come into F1 via Drive to Survive, ergo are fairly new, right? Some of these guys have only, like Man United in football. Like when I was younger, I could only ever remember Man United winning. So when they started to lose, that was a brand new experience. It's almost like football was synonymous with Man United being victorious at the end. And that's the way of very many Mercedes fans have come into the sport. It's like the kids nowadays kids born in the last 10 years will never know a time in the world without the internet. How bonkers is that? Won't even be able to conceive of a world where there was no internet. I'm old enough to remember dial. I'm old enough not just to remember dial-up. Remember a time when there were no mobile phones, no internet even. It's a paradigm shift of a circumstance for them who've only ever known an F1 where Mercedes are winning. Now, that's difficult. It's difficult, Xavier, and I get it, I understand it, but sometimes you have to recalibrate for your expectations, right? Madeline says, can James Allison, him being the guy behind Mercedes' success during their glory years, can he build a competitive car for next year? Absolutely he can, Madeline, but the pertinent one is, will he? There's been a lot of chat about Mike Elliott, whether losing him from the team is material upside or downside or stasis even. It's all speculation, Madeline. It'd be fool's gold for me to say absolutely James Allison will build a car for next year. I think here's what I will say to that, Madeline. Inevitably, after a big change in the rules and regs, teams begin to kind of converge, right? So you'll get one team that nails it and kind of gaps the rest of the field, and then over the next few years, as we get through, as we close in on 2026 and the brand new set of rule and regs, the gap will close between first and the rest. Whether they can do it for next year, I'm hopeful. I hope so. I love watching Clamp. Oh, Gabrielle, cry every single way. Gabrielle, be nice, brother. I don't want to be on here reveling in like, I don't know. I know that sports fans can have, they call it Schadenfreude in German, right? Can rejoice in other people's misery. And I don't know. I've never been that way on here. I just don't. It's not my I don't know. That's not my bag, Gabriel. Privately, listen, you can celebrate if Lewis crashes or Max crashes or whatever, but I've never been that way. You'll never see me. Other content creators might do that, and that's there, but I'm not. Who am I to criticize the way in which other people create their content? Like, I can't. But you'll never see me celebrate, even as a Lewis fan. I don't know. I can't. It's not wired that way. I'm too old, too long in the tooth, too much of a grey-bearded sports fan to rejoice in one of my favourite drivers' rivals' misfortune. Just doesn't feel like the way. That's not the way that I get down over it. Sadly, just the way I am. Silver says, Cameron, how do you think Merck will do at Vegas? Okay, so I think the critical things that we want to notice going into Vegas weekend next weekend is the cooler temperatures, right? So I think Mercedes had a big issue, right? Here was Mercedes' first failing at the Brazilian Grand Prix. When it was for qualifying, if you remember, they all came out, well, Max Verstappen and the Aston Martins came out super quickly and blazed the trail on their outlap, realizing that because it was raining, not just because it's Brazil means it's going to be bloody hot. It was raining and the temps were cooler. So Max, Alonso and Lance realised very quickly in qualifying that they were going to have an issue getting those tyres to the optimum temperature. So they blazed the trail, didn't they? Like a bat out of hell on that outlap were Alonso, Stroll and Max. Hence why they pretty much nailed their qualifying laps. Mercedes, on the other hand, again, didn't read the room. They didn't get the assignment, and they were trundling around the outlap as if A, they had time and it wasn't raining already, and B, it was as if it was warm when it wasn't warm. They needed to get the temps into those bloody tyres, and they'll need to do the same. They'll need to learn from the mistakes, Sylvia, at Brazil and understand A, what the optimum temps are, they'll know that, and B, how to get those tyres to the optimum temps at the right time, not just in quali, but in the race, because again, I think that plays into thermal wear and tyre deg. Here's hoping. I hope they do well, Sylvia, but you know me, I'm a natural born pessimist. I think their car's rubbish, and I think the drivers are disenfranchised at the moment, so it's a triumvirate of an issue. Peter says the issue is that most teams think they are right on the tail of Red Bull, but they forget that Red Bull has been working on the new car for exactly. So there's all these other things underneath that you need to account for, right? When you're talking about when you're trying to understand the true delta between Red Bull and the rest. Jean says, please talk about Toto being soft after Nicky died. You know, Jean, I've heard this trotted out as a theory. Listen, would Mercedes be a better outfit if Nicky was still alive? 100%. But I can't. There's a theory that I've been looking into called apophenia, APOPHENIA, and it's a human cognitive dissonance. It's a human cerebral fallacy where people connect dots that shouldn't be connected. And as we try, it's hard not to do from the outset because we get limited information and we clutch onto every single data point that we can, right? We never get the clear picture. But I don't think it'd be right to say that Nicky's passing away has as sync at the timeline syncs perfectly with Mercedes' decline. Ergo, I'm going to attribute Nicky not being there to Mercedes, like their underperformance. I don't think that's true, because ultimately it wasn't like Nicky was building the car. So Nicky was like managing drivers as a non-exec director. Like he was kind of, do you know what I mean? He was like an overseer, almost like a Helmut Marko, but sans xenophobia and racism, right? And a bit of a nicer guy with some personality, almost like that overseer, the non-exec director type. So I'm not sure that Nicky being around. Okay, so they'd have a bit of an uptick as far as, I think George and Lewis would have less love kisses on track, probably. I think Lewis would probably be a bit happier with Nicky around, but I don't think if Nicky was still alive, I'm not sure that Mercedes would have built themselves a rocket ship, is the point. Interesting though, Sean. I've heard a lot of people say, Foster FW14, last couple now, and I'm going to run away. Zero Pod was still faster than all of the cars, bar Red Bull, and sometimes Ferrari for the 2022 season. Was it though, Foster? So I remember that ever so slightly different. I would characterize 2022 season, if my memory serves, in two parts, right? So you've got the first half, which I refer to as H1, the second half as H2. H1, Ferrari were right. I remember Ferrari, similar story to today, actually. I remember Ferrari were right there, particularly in qualifying, able to out-qualify Max Verstappen often, frequently. Ferrari's problem is that qualifying pace doesn't always translate through to Sundays, does it? That's the problem with Ferrari, and they're still having the same problem now. Although in 2022, as I remember it, especially in H1 before the advent of Technical Directive 038, I think Ferrari had pace sometimes. Particularly, you guys remember Austria 2022. Charles Leclerc was an absolute demon in that race. He was nuts. He was rapid, super quick. Dominated Max Verstappen even. So I don't know. Maybe I'm misremembering it. But yeah, Foster, different characterization. Silver, Jean, things have changed after he passed. Things have changed, Sylvia. But I'm not sure. I can't attribute that much materiality. You never hear me say that things would be different for Mercedes if Nicky was still. I don't know. I just don't think his role. I don't think his role was that instrumental. Lewis, I don't doubt for a sec. Okay, I will get to Lewis. And you know what? Let me put Lewis and Alonso in the same context there. Can you guys see me still? Let me just check this. Oh, you guys can still see me. Okay, I thought I'd gone blank. 107 if you're watching concurrently. Do me a favor and smash the like. Only 35 likes. That's not a good ratio. 1 in 3 currently. Let's get it to 3, por favor, before I log off in the next 5 to 10 minutes. All right, Alonso and Lewis. Let me talk to these guys. Both of them are still brilliant as of November 2023, and we saw Alonso. People have been writing off Alonso over the past couple of weeks, saying that he wasn't the guy, that he was too toxic, that he no longer had the racecraft sufficient to offset the downside that toxicity comes with. All pseudo valid points, right? Alonso, I don't think Alonso is a nice guy outside the cockpit, but does that matter when he's able to do such brilliant things as he did in the closing stages of that Brazilian Grand Prix at the track between the lakes? Like, bloody Nora. Like, he shouldn't be able to beat Checo Perez in that RB19 in an Aston Martin. That's the truth of the matter. And he did it, and the way he did it, the V corners and the bloody deploying the battery at the right time, charging it on every single corner, switching up his braking points just to throw Checo Perez off levels, sacking off the overtake in turn 1 and prioritising the overtake into turn, just levels of racecraft. And it's something that we've always known that he had. Over the past 4 or 5 races, people have begun to doubt him. because he hasn't been there, right? He said he was going to nothing but podiums for the rest of the season, hasn't delivered on that promise. But he's shown you live in living colour that he still has it. He still can get it done against Checo Perez in an RB19. For God's sake, that's mad. Absolute different level of out performance above and beyond was Fernando Alonso. And listen, we've seen Lewis put in similar performances. His performance at bloody Cota was nuts. Like he's Mexico. We've seen flashes of Lewis. He's not gone away. I'm not going to say that Lewis is over the hill yet. Fernando Alonso the same. But to say that both of them, to say that a Fernando Alonso or a Lewis Hamilton would beat Max Verstappen in equal machinery at the age of 42 and 39 respectively, is mate, it's a tall order. I'm not sure I'm looking to take that bet, I'll be honest with you. I don't think, I'll be honest, I don't think I'll take that, but I think it's a young man's game, and I think Max Verstappen is only increasing in strength. But hey, Friday Flexible Force says Patrick Foster, first half of 2020 with Red or Doze. Peter smashed that poor button exactly that. 43 likes only and 114 concurrent viewers. You guys can do the maths. Gabrielle, hit that like here. Gabrielle, Gabrielle, go easy, sir. I think I understand what you're insinuating there, and I can't. I don't know, bro. I've just articulated the way I feel about slandering other channels, and listen, it's go easy, Gabrielle. We haven't got any mods in here yet, so you can. I don't want to freedom of speech and all that, but I think we're on don't fly. None of you guys can fly or afford to fly too close to the sun here. So the banter. Someone talked about Elliot being able to make a new car for Mercedes next year, but Elliot's leaving the team. Yeah, Peter, that's, I don't know. And Mercedes fans around the world rejoiced when Elliot was leaving, myself included, but I think that's a bit of a misnomer because a lot of, I feel like almost like we've been with Binotto. When Binotto left Ferrari, they lost a lot of engineering nous and knowledge, and I feel like Mike Elliott's similar in that. He's been a scapegoat of convenience, has Mike Elliott. Similar thing, I think, to Nicky's passing away. Mercedes' problems are deeper, more insidious than that. Jean, don't engage ignoring me. Let's focus. I appreciate you, Jean. Gabriel Cameron is the best Hamilton fan in F1. Gabriel, thanks, kind of, Gabriel. Abazaz, you can't love one and hate the other. They really are like as racing drivers. I think, Abazaz, you're talking about Fernando Alonso and Lewis. Gabriel, mate, it's no problem. You're yeah, it's just banter. As long as it's banter, Gabriel, I'm not fussed. Yeah, ping me, Sylvia. Madeline, back in 2021, I'll leave it on this. Back in 2021, Max said he's 2 tenths faster than Lewis in the same car. Max always says the truth. He's not playing games. Madeline, does he though? How? I'm not going to accuse Max Verstappen of being a liar, but I mean, all right then, Madeline. Let's look back at it. I think Shez very dutifully did a calc on super times in 2021, and we worked out marginally, very marginally, as a percentage figure, that Mercedes was the quicker car over the course of that year. Marginally, though. So, I mean, if Max only just, okay, notwithstanding Silverstone and Baku, and there's another one, wasn't there? Hungary, I think. Normalising for those, Max Verstappen only just beat Lewis Hamilton. Where did we get 2 tenths from in the equal machinery? I think that's outrageous. I don't know how we'd even calculate that number. You just look at the super times, you'd get a better representation, right? I think they're very even in terms of race pace, more even than probably they realise. I may not believe it's a great team leader. Poor old Binotto. They should have left him think and create it. Exactly that, Peter. You've got to play to your strengths, right? You've got to play to the strengths of your team. Like, that's really, really important, and delegate to those accordingly. That's what you got to do. LA Flame, hey Cam, do you think the McLaren will compete with the Red Bulls next year? And do you have faith in Mercedes? I don't. I hope. Faith is a very techie word, LA Flame. I don't have faith in Mercedes, and I can't. How can I have faith in the Mercedes? Okay, faith maybe should be a function of the fact that they're 8-time Constructors' Championship, but faith is belief without evidence, right? And I've yet to see the evidence that they'll be able to translate a W14 that's not been competitive into a W15 that is competitive with Red Bull. That's the truth. Last couple now, and then I'm running away. Max may not lie, but all teams boast. Yeah, that's a good shout, Peter. Gabriel's sad. That's isn't there. Oh, Gabriel, you still at it, sir. Gabriel, come on, man. Abu Zaz, Max and Lewis are really close racing drivers, and comparing Prime Lewis to Max's current form, they are very like Abu Zaz. You've made the point. You've absolutely made the point. Right, guys, I'm gonna run. I've got to go. I've enjoyed that thoroughly. Do me a favor, on the way out, please smash the like if you haven't already. The world's chaotic at the moment, man, and it's very apropos to hug somebody that you love, because listen, tomorrow's, I don't want to do the life coach here. I'm no Tony Robbins, and I'm not going to start talking in awake the giant within terms. But you guys are all aware of what's going on in different parts of the world, not least Ukraine and the Middle East. Like, it's chaotic out here, and people are losing their lives, which saddens me every single day, to the point where I'm trying not to watch news, to try and put guardrails around my mental health and the family's mental health. You know, it's very techie out here. But you know what, guys? Have a fantastic Friday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend to come. Spend some time with the loved ones. Hug somebody that you love. But between now and next time, Shakedown coming out later. I need to go and edit it now. And it's sick. Incredible episode with a special guest, Aldas. Proper conversation. Top 5 Fernando Alonso moments is what's being discussed. You guys have been legends. Thank you so much for watching the stream. Between now and next time, remember, as always, to look but never stare. Peace.